You're here today to participate in the webinar, The Nation's First Tax Credit for Foster Youth, a look at California's first 3 years. We're really excited to be talking about this topic today. And before we get started, I want to do a quick round of introductions. Good morning. I'm Simone Turek Lee. I'm the Director of Housing and Economic Mobility here at John Burton Advocates for Youth, or JBAY as we go by. And I am thrilled to be joined by Imelda and Veronica. Imelda Islas Olivo is a project manager on the Housing and Economic Mobility team here at JBAY. And for those who have not met Imelda yet, she is relatively new to JBAY, joined this year, and this is her first JBAY webinar. So please join me in welcoming her. And I'm sure many of you will be corresponding with her over the coming months about tax filing and the tax project. I'm also joined by Veronica Galvez from the Community College Foundation. She is the Vice President of Programs and a longtime partner in this work and an incredibly important partner, and we're really happy to have her on with us today. So I know pandemic, we all know how to use Zoom now. I think we've taken this slide out of a lot of our webinars because people know what they're doing. But one reason we kept it is we want to make sure people we are asking you, please, if you have questions, please try to put them in the questions box as opposed to the chat. The questions box just makes it easier for us to organize them and then get to question and answer session at the end of the webinar. So please, at any point throughout the webinar, enter a question. No question is stupid. They're all good questions. Please enter them and we will cover them at the end of the webinar. We are recording this webinar. We will be sharing later today both the slide deck and the recording of the webinar. It'll also be posted on our website in our resource library. So our agenda today, it's a pretty simple one. We are going to be talking about a new report that we released this morning. And that report is on the first 3 years of the Foster Youth Tax Project, or excuse me, the Foster Youth Tax Credit. And we'll quickly cover some background on the Foster Youth Tax Credit. We will talk about sort of implementation strategies. So what's been going on the last 3 years to try to increase awareness about the Foster Youth Tax Credit and to assist young people with filing their taxes to claim it. And then we'll talk about all that we've learned. So what are we learning from the data? What are we learning from the field? And talk through a quick list of recommendations. And then, like I said before, we'll do a question and answer session. So please do enter any questions you have into the Q&A box. All right. So we released the report, as I mentioned, this morning, the nation's first tax credit for foster youth, a look at California's first 3 years. If you've sort of been with us and been with this project the last few years, you know that we've been annually releasing these reports. We were excited this year to be able to look back now at the first 3 years and see where there's been progress, where there's been challenges, and sort of where the program stands, where the tax credit stands now that young people have been able to claim it for 3 years. Imelda worked really hard on this report and gathered a bunch of information, and she'll talk in a little bit about where that information came from and just sort of how we drew the findings and the conclusions in the report. You can get it directly from the link that is on the screen. I believe it's being put into the chat as well. Yes, it is. There it is. And so feel free to download it there. All right, so before we jump in, we do want to thank some people. This has been a group effort, right? It takes a village to implement a tax credit. And first, we want to start just by thanking a lot of the community partners that we've worked with over the last few years. First and foremost, the foster youth specific VITA sites that we've been partnering with. 4 of them are here on the screen that we worked with in the most recent tax season. There's an additional 2 that we've also worked with. The Bill Wilson Center, the Community College Foundation, Lutheran Social Services of Northern California, and San Francisco CASA, court-appointed special advocates. And these are youth serving programs that essentially became volunteer income tax assistance sites to help young people file their taxes and claim this credit. So we will talk a lot about this later in the presentation, but we definitely want to thank them for their service that they provide every tax season. We also want to thank United Ways of California, Golden State Opportunity. They have been critical partners as JBay has entered sort of the free tax prep space, to really like arm in arm with us, help us get acclimated and understand how to get things achieved in this kind of sector. They've also provided funding to many of the VITA sites that I just listed. Prosper California Coalition has been a great advocacy partner in getting the tax credit established and also in working on more recent legislation, SB 624. So we also want to thank all the supporters of that bill that just passed 2 weeks ago. All right. And of course, policymakers and administrators, we are deeply grateful to Senator Ana Caballero, the entire legislature, Governor Gavin Newsom, former State Controller Betty Yee. They were really the champions in establishing this tax credit and have, just been great leaders in this space. And then, of course, the Franchise Tax Board and the California Department of Social Services for implementing the tax credit swiftly, on time, and effectively. So I think I have one more acknowledgements page, and I want to, last but not least, thank the supporters of this work. This list of foundations are those who have supported this work in the first 3 years and that have also sort of pledged to continue to support some of them this work. So thank you so much for being both funders and thought partners to do this work. All right. So a little bit of background, I am going to now pass it over to Imelda to cover this section, and take it away, Imelda.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Simone, for covering, kind of getting us here. I'm really excited to be with you all today and talk about this really special project and the tax credit. But we'll move on to some background. So to start off, we're going to talk about the creation of the foster youth tax credit. So this is the first ever tax credit for foster youth in the nation, which is really important, but also, means we have to learn a lot about how to implement this and how to continue to increase our rate of receipt. So thanks to the support of Governor Gavin Newsom, former State Controller Betty Yee, and Senator Ana Caballero, we were able to establish the FYTC and fund it in the 2021-2022 state budget. Now, this FYTC is administered by, like Simone mentioned, the California Franchise Tax Board, and in partnership with CDSS, or the California Department of Social Services. This CDSS is there to verify that these youth who claim it are actually eligible for the foster youth tax credit. And in 2025, the FYTC provided up to $1,154 for youth who filed their 2024 state tax return, were between the ages of 18 and 25 at the end of the tax year, which is December 31st. And then they were in foster care on or after their 13th birthday. And then lastly, they had to be eligible for the Cali ITC. And this is the California Earned Income Tax Credit, which means that their income had to be between $1 or at least $1 and $31,950. They had to have a social security number or an I-10, and they have to have lived in California for at least half the tax year. Okay. Now let's talk about who is actually eligible for the tax credit. So to be able to kind of estimate this eligibility or the population, what we do is we look at data from CDSS on who was in care on or after their 13th birthday. Now, this gives us roughly 61,307 individuals who are in that age 18 to 25 and in care on or after the 13th birthday. And then we look at data from TAE Research and Evaluation Hub at the California Child Welfare Indicators Project. And we look at the most recent year available, which for some of it, it's, I believe, 2023. And we see roughly who would be employed for at least 1 quarter. And that then narrows it to 33,648. Another thing to note is that to be eligible for this tax credit, youth cannot be claimed as a dependent on another tax return. And that number is really hard for us to really understand, right? We don't have good data on who's being claimed. And so we try to stick with this 33,000 number, but we understand that there's probably, out of those 33,000, it's probably a percentage of them are being claimed as dependents, so they wouldn't be eligible for the foster youth tax credit. Okay, so then now we're going to move on to some implementation strategies that have we've been working on since the last 3 years. So the first one is strategy 1, which is education and outreach. So JBay has partnered with youth-serving organizations and agencies across the state for 3 years, and this has been to disseminate information on the foster youth tax credit to current and former foster youth. JBay has put together webinars like this one, in-person presentations, and they've been distributing a collection of outreach, education, and assistance materials. Last year, there was an FYTC claiming rate competition between counties, and different county representatives were trained on the basics of tax filing and how to help youth collect necessary documents for tax filing. JBay also developed a workshop curriculum for independent living programs to educate youth about filing taxes. And lastly, JBay worked on a digital marketing campaign that draws on social media advertising and post, but this didn't seem to have much of a change in claimant rates. And so these are just some of the ways that we've been really trying to push education and do outreach to current and former foster youth who might be eligible. The next strategy has been access to free one-on-one professional tax preparation. So since the beginning of this project, JBay has provided subgrants to youth-serving organizations to establish and operate specialized volunteer income tax assistance sites for current and former foster youth. Right now, we have 4 sites, but we worked with 2 others. And it's important to note that these are very unique sites, right? Like Simone mentioned, these are your youth-serving organizations that are now taking on this endeavor of helping youth file their taxes. And so we're very thankful for them. And we want to note that in 2025, we provided financial support to these 4 foster youth VITA sites. And we also trained VITA volunteers with at least 24 general VITA sites. But these 4 foster youth VITA sites filed 656 tax returns and collectively refunded $1,340,490 to the youth that they assisted. It's a long number, but just really thankful for all the hard work that they, did this year. And I know that the work wasn't over when we collected this number, so I know that this number is probably higher, but we'll go into methodology in a little bit. We also want to note that if there's any funders or philanthropy that's interested in supporting these amazing organizations to increase and expand the critical work that they're doing, we highly encourage it. Please talk to us if you want to connect with any of these 4 sites. You could see there the counties that they serve, and then how it's, for the most part, been increasing every year, how many youth that they're serving. Okay. Strategy 3. So assistance with free self-filing. So we understand that a lot of current and former foster youth are actually filing their taxes on their own. So we'll look into that data point later. But it's important because in these first 3 years of implementation, JBay and partners have developed and disseminated guides to help these youth file by themselves. Whether it's like a checklist on how to sharing with them different resources on how to file their taxes on their own for free, which is really important. But we want to ensure that youth do not miss out on the foster youth tax credit, and they're aware on how to claim it if they're filing their taxes for free. So JBay has also promoted and incentivized community-based self-filing events across the state. What this means is that a community-based organization will put together an event where 20-25 youth will come. There'll be computers set up, and they'll do step-by-step on how they can use free filing softwares to file their taxes, and they'll kind of walk around and help them do it. Many organizations and college support programs have institutionalized these events as part of their annual programming. So it's great to see that these are continuing to happen across the state. our last strategy has been state policy change, which is extremely exciting because following the establishment of the foster youth tax credit, JMA identified policy changes needed to increase awareness and access of the foster youth tax credit. One of the first pieces of legislation we worked on since implementation was SB 624. And we will continue to pursue other policy changes as needed. But for now, we're excited to announce that in 2025, Senator Ana Caballero authored SB 624 and JBay sponsored the bill. On October 1st of this year, Governor Gavin Newsom signed it into law. So SB 624 requires child county welfare agencies and probation departments to annually mail information about the FYTC and tax filing resources to all non-minor dependents who are still in their system. It additionally requires that the California Department of Social Services will biannually disseminate guidance to these county child welfare agencies and probation departments on best practices on how to increase foster youth tax credit uptake. So we're super excited about this. We will continue to work on implementation on SB 624 and to look for other ways to increase awareness and access to the foster youth tax credit. Okay. Before we move into our findings, we want to share with you all sort of our methodology for this report and this webinar. And the first thing to note is we looked at data from two sources, the Franchise Tax Board and then our 4 VITA sites that we mentioned earlier. And we looked at data consistently as of August 31st for 2020, the year 2023, 2024, and 2025. And the Franchise Tax Board provides this amazing data to us every month, not only on the foster youth tax credit, but on Cali ITC and the young child tax credit. We're able to see data by county, and they also are able to show us the data compared to the previous years. And so this is a lot of data that we were able to work with. It also allowed us to look at the foster youth tax credit for these first 3 years of implementation. So we're really thankful to be able to learn so much about this tax credit through this data. And I think to me, the most amazing thing has been the data from the 4 VITA sites, because it just gives us a deeper dive into how the FYTC implementation has been going. So we're extremely thankful for this partnership with these 4 sites and their willingness to provide all that helpful data. So lastly, it's important to note that we know the official deadline for taxes is October 15th. But we also know that most filers do file their taxes in the first few months of the tax season. So we're confident that, this August 31st data that we're looking at gives us a good clue into kind of what's happening in each tax season. But we want to just point that out so people know that the numbers at the end of the tax season will be slightly different.
We did just get a message from someone saying they can't hear, and I'm wondering if it's specific to one person. If folks could just confirm that you still have audio so that we don't continue to talk. Okay. So the person who can't hear, it sounds like it's on your end and you're probably not hearing me right now. So I will move on. Okay. Imelda, was there anything else you were going to say?
No, that was it.
Okay. And thanks everyone for confirming. Okay. So now we will talk about findings. Let's start out with the number of young people that received the foster youth tax credit this year. So 4,566 youth have received the tax credit as of August 31st. We did get some data from FTB a couple days ago that it's moved up a little bit. But again, we're going to talk about August 31st data. So we're at 5,466. What this is a very slight decrease from last year, a 2%, but it's a 15% increase from 2023. So you can see on the slide, 141 fewer youth when you compare August of this year to August of last year, but 714 more youth compared to 2023. All right. So eligible youth. So Imelda talked about that pool of eligible youth, how that's determined and where it is. And where we are in terms of the proportion of that group that has claimed the tax credit is 16% of those 33 some youth have claimed the tax credit this current year. And I want to kind of point out that might seem low to people, like, wow, 16%. This is such a new tax credit, and we're also still figuring out how to reach everyone who's eligible. So this is, I would say, this is a start, right? And then we have future years to increase this and to develop strategies of how to reach all eligible youth. So that's where we are today. It is an increase from prior years. In year one, we were at 9%. In year two, we were at 15%. So just shy of the 16, we're now at 16%. Some people might be confused because the last slide said we went down slightly on the number of recipients, but now we're up slightly on the number of eligible, or the proportion of eligible youth claiming. And that just has to do with the eligible population evolving. So we know that over the years, less youth are in foster care. That number is shrinking. Also has to do with the number of youth who are employed, right? So employment rates have changed over the years. So every year there's going to be a slightly different pool in terms of size of eligible youth for the tax credit. It's not going to be drastic changes from year to year, but there are changes. And so where that got us to was that 16% this year of that population claimed the tax credit or received the tax credit. So as you can imagine, we have a very diverse state. We have counties of many different sizes, rural, urban, densely populated, not densely populated. Our state looks very different. And so that definitely results in different levels of resources being available. It results in different levels of population size. And different challenges in terms of reaching the eligible population. So where that gets us is really the rate of FYT receipt among eligible youth looks really different across counties. So it's quite a range from 7% to 63%. And one thing that we do each year is we look at which counties kind of had really high rates of eligible youth receiving the tax credit and really low. But we also really want to look at counties compared to similar size counties. So we break counties into three categories. And even in three categories, there's quite variation, right? Like even in that small size category in the yellow box, 0 to 500 eligible youth, there's counties with just a handful of eligible youth, and there's counties with 499 eligible youth. Even that range is quite pretty significant. But so within those three eligible, or those three size categories, we're excited and want to give these counties their props. We have Sutter County had the highest rate of eligible youth receiving the tax credit this past tax season. So it's 63%. That's fantastic. Sacramento is an interesting. Sacramento fell into the large county category last year, but again, those population sizes change a little bit. So Sacramento, if you know, you're a medium-sized county today, and you all took the highest, had the highest rate of the medium-sized counties. So 22% among eligible youth received the tax credit. And then last but not least, in our large county category, so having more than 1,500 youth eligible in the county, is Riverside. And I want to say Riverside is one of those counties that has very strong community support, where there is an annual tax event. Just plugging those annual tax events. I'm sure that has a significant impact on that 19% that they hit. So you can see on the screen, many counties are listed. Not all 58 counties are listed. And the reason not all are listed is because if a county has FYTC claimants that are, youth receiving it, that is below 20, it's masked in the FTB data. So we can't see that number. So therefore, we can't calculate, obviously, the percent of eligible youth that received it. So that's why some counties are omitted, but that just means those counties have very small populations, and so therefore a very small number of youth claiming. Okay, so as of August 31st, the foster youth tax credit refunded just over $6 million to 5,446 current and former foster youth. So that's just for this tax season. So if you probably looked at our webinar description, we kind of quantified it for all 3 years, but for this tax season, just over 6 million. And this is a 21% increase from 2023 in terms of the money refunded, and relatively consistent with 2024. Um, Now, just to highlight, the amount of the tax credit increases each year for inflation. So even if we had the same number of youth claiming the credit, it would still be a slight increase in terms of the amount of money received. Another thing to note is that the tax credit, it's $1,154. It's up to that amount for this year. So that means, not every young person who claims the credit gets that full 1154. It really depends on your income and tax situation. And so what happens is the value of the tax credit decreases by $20 for every $100 someone earns earns above $25,000. So if you've earned between $0 and $25,000, you're getting that full credit. Once you go above 25,000, you're getting it discounted by $20 for every $100 you earn. And so a small portion of young people are receiving, less than that 1154, but you can tell from that average amount, that $1,104, that's just $50 less than the full credit. So you can tell from that average, it's a very small number of young people that aren't receiving the full amount. The credit maxes out when you earn $31,950 for this tax season. So anything between 25,000 and that 31,000 figure is where you start seeing the lesser amount. All right. So average tax refunds. So we're kind of shifting gears here. This finding sort of takes the analysis a step further. So the last few findings were really explicit to the foster youth tax credit, how much young people received from that credit alone. But one of the things I love about this kind of tax credit as an intervention and as a poverty reduction strategy is that it is more than the tax credit, right? It's connecting young people to this world of filing taxes. And when we're doing that, not only are they getting some independent living skills, because we all got to file taxes someday, the saying, but we're also unlocking additional credits, right? So they're getting that 1154, and they might also be getting the Cali ITC. They might also be getting the federal EITC. They might be getting credits related to parenting, child tax credits. So what that means is their average refunds are higher than the foster youth tax credit alone. So when and this data comes from the VITA sites, right? This is what Imelda was referencing, and it being such valuable data. We're able to look at the VITA site, the foster youth VITA sites data, and see how much young people are getting in total. And so the average refund, when you break it down by filing status, we're able to, look at who had dependent children and who didn't, because there's a big difference in tax filing in terms of what you're eligible for and what you get when you are parenting, a custodial parent. So $1,857 was the amount of the average refund for youth who filed without dependents. So most commonly, right? Most youth don't have dependents, but there is a portion of young people that do have dependents. And those young people, those parenting youth, on average received a total of $4,008 in their total tax refund. And this is, I want to note, a significant change from prior years. If you look at the chart, you can see the average refund for each of the 3 years that the tax credit's been available. And on the right, you can see the percent change. So you can see it's an increase of 27% for youth who filed without dependents and a decrease of 25% for youth who filed with dependents. At first, we scratched our heads like, that's interesting. Thought about it, looked at data and past year's data, and realized these shifts are likely tied to first just changes in income across years. So you'll see later in the presentation, we'll discuss later that a greater percentage of filers without dependents and a smaller percentage of filers with dependents had incomes below the federal poverty level before filing. So we know there's been a difference in income versus sort of household size from previous years. The other thing that is a factor that's very unique to right now is pandemic stimulus payments. Yes, we're still talking about those. You could claim those up until certain years, and some of them expired last year, and then one expired this year. our hunch is that the two that expired last year, a lot of young people probably got those for last year and the year before. And I'm guessing fewer youth claimed that last payment this year. They probably had already recovered it from filing taxes the year prior. So there's less of that sort of tacking on of amount based on stimulus payments to tax refunds as there was the first 2 years. The first 2 years, it was the in the 5,000s for parenting youth, right? And that makes sense because those stimulus payments were larger for parenting youth. So that's what our takeaway is from this. There could be other factors that we're not identifying, but that's what we're thinking. And interestingly, it all sort of evens out in the end. When you look at the population as a whole, there's just a 3% increase when you take out sort of filing status. So we thought that was certainly interesting. When you look at this collectively, it gets really big. That's really, really exciting. So when you look at the collective impact of those tax credits, nearly 11.5 million was refunded to foster youth tax credit recipients in 2025 in their full tax refund. And that's, nearly consistent with 2024, I think down 1%, I think. And it's up 9% from 2023. And the way that we figure this out is we multiply the amount of the average tax return or tax refund by filing status, right? With the number of foster youth tax credit recipients that are estimated to have received a refund. So we know a small portion of those young people are not receiving a refund, they're actually owing. So we take them out of the equation and then we perform that calculation to get at that number. So it's a pretty close, estimate, but not exact. Okay. So increase in annual income. This is, this is one of the main reasons this tax credit exists, right? We know that young people who are 18, 19, 20, up to 25, like income is not plush, right? Like that's just not an age in life where people are earning a lot of money. Some might not be earning any. Some might still be in school. And we know that this is a population that does not tend to have a ton of family financial support, right? Or that sort of safety net of a family home that they can fall back on. And so we know that assistance in increasing income is important, particularly in a state with such high cost of living, particularly in some counties. So, so when we look again at the foster youth data, VitaCites data, we can look at an individual's income versus their individual income prior to filing and then what it is from filing afterward. So we know what percentage of youth are below the federal poverty level. We know like what the average income amount is. And so we take this information and you can sort of see in the table there that on average filer or youth without dependents increase their annual income by 10% from filing taxes and receiving a refund. And for filers with dependents, they increase their income by 12%. So that's when we just look at sort of adjusted gross income. The next thing we're going to do is look at poverty reduction. So because we can look at, again, income relative to filing status, we know what percentage of youth were below the federal poverty level prior to filing and how that changed from filing. So tax refunds reduced poverty among the group of youth who filed without dependents by 9%, and for those with dependents by 7%. So there were 9% less youth who were below the federal poverty level after filing among youth who are not parenting, 7% youth who are parenting. You can see from the chart prior to filing taxes, 54% of youth without dependents had income placing them below the federal poverty level. That decreased to 49% after filing. And then for those with dependents, 71%, so almost 3/4, right, are below the federal poverty level before filing. That decreased to 66%. I do think it's really important to note, like we don't want to miss this key thing here is that, being below the federal poverty level in California is deep poverty. We are not in we're in a state that has very high cost of living and higher earnings than other states. And so, when we talk about the federal poverty level, it is quite low for Californians. And so it's just a reminder that 18 to 25-year-olds, again, this is not an era of life that people are making a lot of money. And so, I'll channel our former director in saying that, I don't think it's a stretch to say that tax filing could be seen as a, social justice strategy here in terms of reducing poverty and redistributing wealth. Okay, so one more slide kind of focus on poverty rates that we thought was interesting. In 2025, the poverty rate was higher among filers without dependents than in 2023 and lower among filers with dependents. And this, prior to filing. So the chart illustrates this. The proportion of youth without dependents with incomes below the federal poverty level before filing their taxes was 48% in 2023, 46% in 2024, and rose to 54% in 2025. So just kind of some food for thought and how things might be shifting in our world right now for various subpopulations. But again, don't want to miss the salient point here that there are a high number of youth living below the federal poverty level, as I pointed out in the previous slide, altogether. So yes, there's been changes, but at the end of the day, we're still seeing that these are numbers we want to drastically reduce, right? All right. So other credits. So we talked a lot about the foster youth tax credit. We alluded to other credits. These are just some of the additional credits that youth are commonly eligible for. And we wanted to know, which credits youth are most commonly getting. So in 2025, the most commonly received tax credit among youth who filed at one of those 4 VITA sites, right, was the Cali ITC, the California Earned Income Tax Credit. Now that's sort of the umbrella tax credit that's over the foster youth tax credit and the young child tax credit. They're in a family together. And so in order to get the foster youth tax credit, you do have to be Cali ITC eligible. So it makes sense for those numbers to be pretty similar. So you can see they're almost equal. For the Cali ITC this year, 77% of youth got that credit, and then 76% got the foster youth tax credit. So they're both received by at least 3/4 of youth. And then the other credits are, less youth got those credits. So the earned income tax credit, there are different rules related to the federal earned income tax credit, and then the other tax credits are more niche, right? So to get the college education credits, you need to be in college, and to get the child tax credits, you need to have a child. So obviously those are not going to be as high as the other credits. So that concludes the findings that I'm covering. I'm going to pass it back to Imelda to cover some additional findings, and then we're going to hear from Veronica, and then we will talk about recommendations.
Thanks, Simone. So the first thing I'll be discussing is tax liability. So like Simone mentioned, not all the youth who file their tax returns receive a refund. So in 2025, looking at the VITA data, about 5% of current and former foster youth had a tax liability. And on average, they owed about $1,132. So this pie graph here is showing you that 5% had a tax liability, 92% received a tax refund, and 3% didn't receive a refund and didn't owe. So that's important to note, because we can't say, oh, 92% received a tax refund, therefore 8% owed, right? That's not true. Only 5% of them owed. The others, it was just a zero. They filed, didn't get a refund, didn't owe. It's also important to note that for those who filed with dependents, the average amount that they owed was actually $563. So it dropped significantly among those who filed with dependents. For the next slide, we'll look at filing status and how it's changed since 2023. So since 2023, there has been an incremental increase in the proportion of FYTC recipients that are filing as single. And then there's been a decline in filing as head of household. So in 2023, 75% of all filers, this is FTB data, filed as single. And then in 2024, that rose to 77%. And then in 2025, it rose to 79%. Head of household has decreased from 23% in 2023. It then decreased to 21% in 2024. And then for the 2025 tax season, it decreased to 19%. For married, it's such a small percentage that we kind of just looped in filing jointly and separately into one filing status, and it's remained the same at 2% across the 3 years. So we are very interested, we talk a lot about VITA and how great it is, and we just want to see kind of where the numbers are at and how youth are filing their taxes. And so we've seen that since 2023, there has been a small but steady increase in the percentage of FYT recipients who are filing their taxes at a VITA site. And there's been a decrease in self-filing. Now, this is generally all filers, not just, this is FTB data that we're looking at. And so to just make sure that we're all on the same page, self-prepared or self-filing means that the youth used something like TurboTax or myfreetaxes.org, where they can file on their own independently. So since 2023, 85% of these youth were using self-prepared sites. It then decreased in 2024 to 81%, and then in 2025, it was at 78%. For VITA, there was a almost 4 percentage point increase from 2023 at 10% to 2025 to 14%. So to us, this is great news, right? We really want the youth to take advantage of these VITA resources. The other thing to note here is for paid preparers, it has a slight increase, right? So in 2023, we were at 5% of the youth filed some paid preparer, and then it increased in 2024 to 8% and remained the same at 8% in 2025. This, is something that we will discuss a little bit later, but we want to make sure that for the youth that do file with paid preparers, because it still exists, people are still using paid preparers, that they know about the foster youth tax credit, right? And so this number might be low because maybe not everybody who files with paid preparers is actually receiving the foster youth tax credit, but just wanted to note that. The next thing we did was we looked at age and the age distribution. So rates of FYT recipients were the highest among those aged 20 to 25. Now, this distribution is expected since, many 18 and 19-year-olds are probably not earning any income, or they're likely to be claimed as dependents on other, people's taxes, like we mentioned earlier, which just doesn't qualify them for the FYTC. And so, as you can see, a 2% were age 26 when they filed. And you might be wondering, but the foster youth tax credit is only for 18 to 25. This is the age that the individual was when they actually filed their taxes. So they might have been 25 in the tax season and turned 26 in 2025. Just wanted to make that, distinction or that clear. The other thing is there might have been individuals who were 18 in 2025, but they might have still been 17 during the tax year, which doesn't make them eligible. So this is something that I think somebody might have put in the chat a question about, but one of the main obstacles that we're seeing is that it's going to be difficult to do outreach to all eligible youth because there's a significant increasing in FYTC recipient rate. Sorry, there's a significant amount of youth who have exited foster care prior to turning 18. So that could have been that they exited because of adoption, guardianship, or reunification. And so we're estimating that about 67% of FYTC eligible youth are no longer a part of the system. That's about 22,528. And that's the majority of those who are eligible. And so there is roughly 7,420 non-minor dependents in the care of county child welfare agencies, as well as approximately 3,700 former foster youth who are participating in transitional housing or have a housing voucher. So there's a way for us to know where they are, an address, contact information for us to push out that education and outreach. But there's still that large percentage, 67% of youth who are not a part of the system. There's no way for us to, use the county child welfare agencies and probation departments to, do outreach to them. So this is something that we're mindful of. We're looking at different strategies on how we can let these folks know that they're eligible for the foster youth tax credit. Now, at the very beginning, Simone did mention that we saw a decrease in number of recipients and compared to 2024 this year. And so we were really wondering why that might be. And thanks to the FTB data, we were able to see that across the board, there was a decrease in tax credits that were claimed under the Cali ITC program. It's not just the FYTC. So in this chart, you could see that for the Cali ITC, there was a decrease in 182,766 filers in the 2024-25 tax season, which is a drop of 3%. For the YCTC, or the Young Child Tax Credit, there was a drop of around 9,811 filers, which is a drop of 6%. And then for the FYTC, there was a drop of 3%, or 141 filers. So across the board, there was a sort of like cooling off this tax season. It's not something that we can say like, oh, it just happened for the foster youth tax credit. Across the board, we saw a drop. And this is important to note that, again, this is as of August 31st. I did look at the most recent data we have from the Franchise Tax Board, and there's still across the board a decrease in recipients for all the state tax credits under Cali ITC program. Okay, our last finding before we move on to Veronica is there are staff at general VITA sites that have expressed a very strong interest in training on how to better prepare current and former foster youth with tax filing. So we know that some youth are going to other VITA sites, not just the 4 that we've mentioned. And so there's been a few that have reached out or have been interested in being trained on how to work with this population. So we understand that current and former foster youth often require more time and resources than typical clients due to their age, limited filing experience, trauma history, and difficulty accessing necessary documents. And so we know that this population will come in and likely need more hand-holding, right? They need the VITA volunteers to be more patient, to take their time, explain all the different tax credits or what the different documentation that is necessary means and how they can access it. And so we just know that there's this need for general VITA sites to be trained on how to best support this population. And I know that Veronica will cover a little bit more, but I'm happy to, hand it off to Veronica, a great partner and just so knowledgeable on all things foster youth tax credit, and just now all tax credit preparation, I want to say, but I'll take it away, Veronica.
Thank you so much. Veronica Galvez. I'm with the Community College Foundation. We have a VITA site in LA County, serving current and former foster youth. We also have a general site in Sacramento and an e-bus program. I've been working with current and former foster youth for will officially be my 20th year, November 1st. I'm excited to be here and tell you a little bit more about the additional support services that we provide going through this process with young people. For me, when I was presented with this project, it was really important to me to sort of link in young people to all the additional resources that we provide, and also include a financial literacy component to it. Because, it's great to have this one-time influx of cash, but, it's also important to think about, what wonderful things you could plan for your future with that additional funds. Different ways to look at security and abundance versus, a different mindset. Sorry, I have to pull up some notes. So, I'll say about our site in LA, we have a unique partnership with the LA County Department of Children and Family Services, where we're able to remove barriers to their filing. So, as Imelda mentioned, some of our young people come not having all of their vital documents, not having their W-2s ready. So we help with a lot of document retrieval through our volunteers, but also we provide ward of the court letters through this amazing partnership. And those word of the court letters can also serve as a copy of their social security number or card if they don't happen to have that vital document. If they don't have a bank account, we help link them to bank accounts through Banked On that are specifically for them, easy to access, low fees, to make sure that they don't end up, dwindling away their savings with like all these additional fees, that their bank accounts that are specifically for their age range and circumstances. Let's see. We provide financial literacy classes. So a lot of our young people come in not knowing why we pay taxes, what taxes are about, where the taxes go to. And we think that's really important framing for them to know how this tax process works, to demystify this weird process of like what comes out of their checks, where it goes, what that gets paid to, and how that can come back to them or not, right? Some things we pay into, they don't come back to us at all. Or we might, when we apply for disability or other state programs or federal programs. Our financial literacy classes include like banking 101, credit cards, how to manage those credit cards, how to pull your credit reports, how to properly fill out a W-4. So some of our young people will come in and, they put zero withholdings and they're very confused as to why they might owe some taxes. And so we help to support them in revising their W-4s. We also have a great partnership with Advisors Give Back. Shout out to them. They're this wonderful group of financial planners that volunteer their time and offer free financial advice to our young people. They go through and help support us in helping to revise those W-4s so that in the upcoming filing year, they won't encounter the same issues. We encounter some identity theft with our young people who are systems involved. Occasionally, they'll be claimed by someone who shouldn't have, and so we offer additional support to help them in that. Put an identity protection pin through the IRS to protect them in the future, to protect their children from any fraud. We help them to file the fraud paperwork. That can also be a very complicated process, as you know, with the IRS and with the state. And so we help prepare all those documents for them, have them sign, and we mail that out. A lot of our young people, especially with the state credits, there's sort of an audit process to make sure that their income that they received is valid and proven, and so their refunds won't get released. They'll get these letters from either the IRS or the Franchise Tax Board, and we'll have to interpret those letters, explain to them what the state is asking for, what documents they need to provide to prove that they're eligible for the credit. And then we help them by faxing that information to the respective agencies. Did I cover everything? I think I did. Happy to answer any questions about our site. I just want to shout out Jenny Serrano at Special Projects VIP with the LADCFS. She personally does all of our word of the court letters. She does hundreds every season. We could not do that without her and her amazing partnership. And over the years, we've been able to increase the amount of young people we support with these additional referrals to resources and bank accounts, financial literacy, identity theft. She's with us every way. Oh, the last thing I'll mention is that we have a partnership with the Change Reaction. And they're a Los Angeles-based nonprofit that helps with supporting young people in either developing their careers or in their career journeys, and also helping when young people or all people working encounter like a disruptive financial event in their life. So sometimes, we'll be filing a tax return, a young person will share, they're having car issues or, they don't have a laptop needed for college or, we're going through expenses with them and they share some lack of something and we're able to apply with the Change Reaction and provide them those needed resources. So shout out to the Change Reaction who have helped with down payments on cars, helped with laptops for young people, have helped pay their phone bills, utility bills, necessary dental things that have come up. And, young people share a lot of tender, vulnerable information with us when we're filing their taxes. And it's really beautiful to be able to not just hear them and support them, but to say, hey, I might have the solution for you. And I think that really keeps me in this work is to have really tangible solutions for young people to bring them money. It's like it's an arduous process to file your taxes, but it's a very clear beginning end to something, and they're always so grateful, and it really is life-changing for them. Thanks for
Veronica, if you don't mind, I want to just put you on the spot for 1 minute.
sure.
Would you mind, because we're talking about sort of some, like local strategies, right? Would
Yeah.
you mind talking just for maybe a minute about the Claim Your Cash pilot that is not specific to the foster youth tax credit, but it is an initiative or an effort in LA County to connect people to tax filing, and just talk maybe just about, how that's maybe helped in terms of foster youth and the foster youth tax credit?
Yeah, so there are a lot of VITA sites in LA County. Not all of the VITA sites were as familiar with the foster youth tax credit because it is so new. And so young people might be going to different VITA sites, not knowing about the credits that are available to them and how to claim their cash. And so this wonderful pilot helps to provide training to a lot of the VITA sites and kind of a warm handoff to these young people to let them know how they can access. And we're sort of tracking that warm handoff process to say if they go to a county like DPSS, if they go to a county community center, or whatever their entryway is, a social worker refers them, that we're seeing that they're coming to our site or another site that's been trained to help them specifically.
Thank you. All right. So Veronica's going to stick around. I see people have questions for her in the Q&A box. Feel free to keep sending them. She will stick around to answer those questions. We're going to move on to recommendations. And we just have a short list, and then we'll jump into Q&A in about 15 minutes. So move the slide ahead here. So the first recommendation has to do with the legislation we mentioned sort of in the beginning of the webinar, SB 624. So we are recommending that counties adopt best practices for foster youth tax credit outreach and tax filing assistance that are sort of embedded in SB 624, which was authored by Senator Caballero. And that legislation just passed. So it's taking effect next January 1, but there will be, sort of, it won't actually sort of impact us until the following tax season, right? So it requires county child welfare agencies and probation departments to mail information about the foster youth tax credit and free tax filing resources to all non-minor dependents on an annual basis. And so, and by the way, this strategy was piloted in 4 counties last year, and we found it to be the most impactful strategy to increase claiming from year 1 to year 2. Yeah, 1 to 2. So this was the basis for this bill, or part of the basis for this bill. And so that mailing strategy, even though the bill takes effect in 2026, that mailing strategy is not going to occur until just prior to the 2027 tax season, because first the state guidance will come out. That state guidance will come out by next July. Counties will send their notices starting the November of next year. So we recommend don't wait till the 2027 tax season. It is a light lift in terms of mandates. We know there are many at the county level. We will do everything we can to make it a light lift for you. We will give you a customized flyer that you can send young people. It will have a QR code specific to your county that's trackable, so you can see the impact. And we would love to partner with any county on this early that wants to do this. Like I said, this happened in 4 counties already last tax season. And so any county that is interested in, getting a jump start on this just prior to next tax season, email Imelda. Imelda, you want to put your email in the chat? And we'd love to partner with you. The bill also, like I said, directs the California Department of Social Services to issue at least biannual guidance. And so we are thrilled to partner with them on this guidance. And we'll also be putting out a county toolkit for next tax season, though, that'll have a lot of kind of drilled down further on some of the strategies that the state will put out. And, again, happy to work with any county on implementing those that's interested. So keep your eye out for those. Okay, the next one is about those youth that are less reachable, right? We talked about that 67% who are kind of no longer formally connected to the county. They're former foster youth. The majority of them did exit before 18, right? And so they've been not connected to the county for some time. It's not like, oh, I just exited foster care 6 months ago, and I might still be living at the same address. It's young people who could have exited at 14, and now we're 10 years later, and they're maybe living with the home they reunified in. Maybe they're living on their own. Maybe they're living with a guardian or an adoptive parent. But regardless, those are not the young people that are going to be reached by SB 624, right? They're not non-minor dependents that are currently in the system. And they're also not young people that might benefit from some of those best practices, like partnering with housing providers to do a self-filing event, right? There's transitional housing and there's housing voucher programs that are kind of administered by or in partnership with the county. And so there's still that connection and that ability to reach those young people. Again, those young people are not the majority of the eligible population. So we are not going to be able to move the needle on that sort of increasing the receipt rate from 16% significantly without a second strategy. And so we definitely need to identify new strategies to reach that population by partnering with maybe different sectors, because county child welfare is probably not going to be it, right? Or probation is not going to be it for that sector. It's going to, or for that portion of the population. One thing we've been looking into and talking with folks at certain county offices of ed, shout out to SF Unified, San Francisco Unified, for some great ideas, is partnering with the education sector, because they have different data and they work with all students, right? And they have information based on, they use the CalPADS, what does that stand? California Longitudinal Pupil Achievement data system. They can identify in that data system, who was in foster care at their school or in their district on or after their 13th birthday, because that is the same criteria that gets you independent student status on the FAFSA, right? The free application for federal student aid, the financial aid FAFSA, or the CATA, Dream Act application. To be independent on that means that you are not going to be counting any sort of parental income when determining financial aid. And so it means young people are eligible for need-based aid. And so the Foster Youth Services Coordinating Programs, the FYSCPs, I know we have a lot of acronyms in here, are within county offices of ed, and they are already reaching out to students who meet that independent status, right? Because they were in foster care on or after their 13th birthday, and they're helping them complete the FAFSA, right? And so they've been, long been figuring out strategies to identify that population and to outreach to them. And so coupling some of this foster youth tax credit outreach with some of that FAFSA outreach is one strategy that we're going to be piloting next tax season. And so we will share how that goes, and we're very hopeful. And if anyone has other ideas, by the way, we would love to hear them for how to tap into data sets or existing outreach efforts to reach more young people beyond non-minor dependents and former foster youth that are connected to housing programs. Okay. The third third recommendation is to implement training for VITA volunteers on assisting current and former foster youth and claiming the foster youth tax credit. Now, this is not specific to like the Veronicas of the world. She already knows how to do that. She could train us on doing that. This is talking about the general VITA sites. So you have VITA sites all throughout the country, right? In California, you might have one, like San Francisco has one in its Chinatown area. You might have one that's at a senior center in LA. I mean, they're sort of often nestled in a community and are catering to that community. And so these are general VITA sites that the volunteers there may not even know what the foster care system is, right? We don't know. It's a whole range of very generous people volunteering their time to assist people with free tax filing. And so those sites, like Imelda shared, they're interested in serving young people and helping them get this tax credit. They just don't necessarily have that information. And so if you are a general VITA site, having a policy that you are annually going to make sure your volunteers receive training on this tax credit and working with young people from the foster care system would increase that capacity, right? We know that the foster youth VITA sites are like best thing since sliced bread. There's not enough of them. They are not going to be able to assist every young person from foster care, right? We know that. So we've got to increase our capacity using other strategies. And the other thing to mention, and why this is important, is because VITA is a federal program. It's connected to the IRS. So the materials and the training is very focused on federal taxes. It's harder to get state tax training. And even if you get that state level training, it's not necessarily going to have the foster youth tax credit in it. It is such a small population compared to other state tax credit eligible populations, and it's new, right? So again, this is all part of expanding awareness. Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Imelda for, I think, just a couple more recommendations, and then we're going to move to Q&A.
Thank you. So our next recommendation is for all counties to replicate this Claim Your Crash pilot program that Veronica spoke about. And so what this is, it's led by the Los Angeles County Chief Executive Officer in partnership with the Economic Security Project. And this program establishes tax filing as a priority activity for all county agencies. So like Veronica said, county personnel can direct filers to community-based assistance centers to receive help with filing their taxes for free. This increases tax filing outreach for foster youth because it's integrated into larger community efforts, right? And so any foster youth, current former foster youth could go to another county agency, and that county agency can say, hey, have you filed your taxes? No, let me do a warm handoff, right, to these community-based organizations that are doing tax prep. And so it would be great for all counties across the state to replicate something similar to this to increase outreach on not just to former and current foster youth, but to all individuals who might benefit from free tax prep assistance. The next one is for there to be a standardized the provision of financial literacy education for older foster youth. So like we've learned throughout the webinar, there is a need for this population to receive a curriculum that focuses on such important topics like budgeting, saving, credit, banking, and tax filing. And so it's recognized that this is essential for youth to transition out of foster care and into adulthood. And it also, it needs to be something that is consistent and kind of just embraced by the state to make sure that these youth are successful after foster care. So our last recommendation, I know I've gone a little bit quick, but want to make sure we have some time for that Q&A, is to ensure that youth have a bank account upon exiting foster care. So, I know that this is something that is talked about in a lot of, there's been a lot of effort into making sure that young adults have bank accounts when they're exiting foster care. But this is, as we all know, a critical step toward independent adulthood and financial stability. It's extra important because beginning September 30th, the IRS will begin phasing out paper tax refund checks. And this is because of Executive Order 14247. And so across the board, this administration has decided to get rid of paper checks. And so it's more critical than ever that foster youth have a bank account for not just tax filing, but just any other benefits that might get rid of the paper checks starting next year. But like we saw, the IRS is already phasing out these paper checks for tax refunds, and they're going to come out with full guidance for the 2026 tax filing season. So for now, this is something that we will be tracking and making sure that we put in a newsletter or whatever it is once this guidance comes out. And I think we're ready for Q&A.
Yes. All right. Well, we're getting already suggestions for how to reach this population. So I'm super excited to see this. People have said maybe talk to the continuum of care, the home's continuum of care, and see, who indicated they were in foster care on the VSPDAT. Love that. People talked about McKinney-Vento liaisons. So thank you. We are going to take all that and try it. So thank you. So the first question is sort of a question about assisting young people, and I'm going to pitch it to you, Veronica. What are some resources for youth to get copies of W-2s from past years? We find that getting a transcript from the IRS, Social Security numbers and employment identification numbers are redacted.
Yeah, we have a few modes. Obviously, we go to the employer. We help the young person. We walk them through the process of contacting the employer to have them resend the W-2s. So that's the easiest method. The more complicated method is we will take those IRS transcripts and use the information, recreate them basically, and to get the missing EINs, I'll look up the companies through what is this called? EDGAR, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. So you can use their database to find those. Sometimes you can just Google to get the number, especially if it's a corporate. You can call to get that EIN number. Usually, again, if it's a corporation, we've had some cases where it was a small business, they no longer exist. And that's for the federal EIN. For the state, we go to the Secretary of State and we pull those state numbers from there. That's the easiest, honest. You're all registered there. If you can figure out, the correct name of the company, you can find those numbers and recreate using that transcript.
Thanks, Veronica. Someone said, this was back referring to the finding that there were less head of household filers, and they asked, confirming that head of household relates to filing with dependents. Generally, yes, it does. And so the question was, if yes, do we know if there are fewer parenting foster youth? And that would likely be the decrease. So there are fewer parenting foster youth. It's not extreme. I just looked it up to double check the number. It was 736 in 2024 and 653 in 2025. So we've seen a slight dip, but we've also seen a dip in foster care numbers overall. So I don't know that if it is a deeper dive, that, a deeper decline than overall foster youth, it could be, but I don't think it's drastic enough to account for the reduction in head of household, because again, like that's current foster youth. And there's still all of the young people like above 21 that or that are just former foster youth, but that are younger that are parenting as well. So I maybe, but it doesn't appear so. Um, one question we also got was, are there any plans to expand the VITA sites to other large counties? So maybe that question is we'll put back on the person who asked it. If you know of a youth serving organization in your community that's interested in becoming a VITA site, we're happy to talk with them and connect them to resources to become a VITA site. And I also want to say, you can be VITA site-ish. You don't have to actually become a VITA site. There's other ways to offer youth VITA in your community by being in partnership with a general VITA site, where you could host sub-site events where they send their volunteers to assist young people. You could do it on site at your program or somewhere else for a specific window of time. There's also self-filing events that you could do. If there are organizations that want to become VITA sites, fantastic. And then there's also kind of less left like lower barrier ways to provide sort of the VITA intervention to young people. We do not have plans to expand VITA as an organization. Like, we don't have our eyes set on an organization that we're working with to partner. But again, if there's organizations that are interested, please do reach out to us. Another question we got was about the mailers that we talked about. So Imelda, I'm going to pitch this one to you. So someone asked, is there a pre-approved mailer that counties can use? And then also someone else asked, they wanted to confirm that this flyer could be sent to any eligible youth in the county. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think we have, mailers that we can work with you all to personalize a little bit, depending on your county. And you could send it to all the non-minor dependents, right, that are still part of probation department or the county child welfare agencies. We do have flyers that could be sent to any eligible youth, right? If you find other ways that you can do that outreach, we have flyers that we will be updating, because right now it has that 2025 number, right? Like Simone said, that 100 or 1,154 will go up each year. And so for the next tax season, we'll update these flyers on our website. And I will look for the link, or Simone, if you have it, with, sort of all of this information on our website. But please email me if you have more questions or ways that we can support you to get those mailers out before it is a state requirement.
Thank you. And thanks someone else for suggesting amending WIC 391 to require the FYTC be on that list of information that has to be provided to young people before they exit. That's also a great idea.
I think Veronica, yeah, you had your hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
There's two questions in the general, so I just want to answer them.
Yeah, go for it.
Someone asked, are King Gap youth eligible for the tax credit? They are not. Most guardianship and or family maintenance cases are also ineligible. And then someone asked about the employment requirement for eligibility. It's not employment requirement for the foster youth tax credit. It's $1 of income. So a lot of times young people will do side jobs. They'll help a neighbor. They'll get paid. They'll do some babysitting. They'll do hair. As long as they have proof of that income, even if it's a Zelle, Cash App, something, they can count that as that $1 of income.
I also want to note that this requirement for at least $1 is because the FYTC is part of the Cali ITC program. So it's under sort of that umbrella, which makes income a requirement.
Thank you. Veronica, there's another one for you. Someone wants to know, they said they're in the field of, now I don't have it in front of me, but I remember it, of like being a financial coordinator, I think, or specialist it was. And they wanted to know how to become a VITA volunteer. Like, how can they get certified? What does that process look like?
Well, happy to help you find a Vita site near you. We're remote, so if you want to be a volunteer with us, we will definitely onboard you, handhold you through the whole process. Generally, there's a certification process through an IRS website, Link and Learn, and you would go through that process. But ahead of that, you would take some classes, either in person or online. Most of them are online now, to be able to answer the questions that are on the certification test.
Got another one for you, Veronica. Um, so if you can talk, I'm sending you all the kind of ones that are have to do with assisting young people individually. So if they have school expenses, does that, I think the question is, does that count as income? I think is maybe the question. And then separately, does selling things on the internet count as income to meet that $1 requirement?
Usually selling things on the internet, it depends on what it is. If you're selling a service, yes. If it's some kind of work, if you're just selling something that you own and reselling it, that's likely not. Was there
I
another part of that question? I
I
can't.
think
The
it
rest.
says, if they have school expenses, does that count to get the credit?
Uh,
I'm not actually sure what that, maybe if the person who sent that can maybe clarify on that question.
It really depends with school expenses. If they're at a school and they have qualified education expenses, then sometimes they're eligible for credit. For most community colleges or young people have all of their tuition paid. They don't have any qualified education expenses. If on top of that they buy a laptop, they buy supplies, then they are eligible for that money to come back to them. But generally, the actual like refundable credit part or that part has to do with tuition and those expenses. So it's
Thank
really
you.
case by case. Yeah.
So one question we just got is, if a client has yet to file taxes, what would be the best steps to take? So I think just generally, if you are a first time filer, we recommend you go with a Vita site versus self filing, because it can be really daunting that first time. Everyone probably can think back to maybe when the first time they filed taxes was, and they, a lot of people had assistance. Maybe some didn't, but it can be intimidating. It can be challenging, even with a simple tax situation, just to understand and navigate it. So we do recommend visiting a Vita site, and we have a roster of Vita sites available on our website. Imelda, maybe if you can put the link to the Vita roster and then the Vita flyer in the chat, so that people have that. And so you can, or the young person, or you can help them find either a Vita site that's in their area that is hopefully maybe a foster youth Vita site, or they can go to a general Vita site and be assisted there. Like Veronica said, some of these sites, hers included, do assist people virtually. So like Veronica, even though she's in LA and her site is sort of LA focused, she assists a lot of the other SoCal counties, young people from SoCal counties. And then SF CASA in San Francisco this past tax season assisted young people statewide virtually. So it wasn't only San Francisco youth. The majority of their youth are San Francisco youth, but they were open to assisting other youth in other counties. So we would recommend using that roster to identify a site. And we also have a tax prep checklist, maybe that Imelda can drop in. So before that young person visits the Vita site, we recommend sitting down with them and going through with them each document they're going to need to file, so that they come to that Vita site appointment prepared and they can get it done all in one site or all in one appointment. Okay, Veronica, I have one more for you. It's about financial aid. Okay, does financial aid, Chafee grants, other scholarships count as income? And do they count toward that $31,000 cap?
Um, so yes and no. Financial aid, Chafee, other scholarships count as income, but not earned income. So if they only have financial aid, Chafee, other scholarships as income, that does not qualify them for the $1 of earned income for the foster youth tax credit. However, financial aid, Chafee, other scholarships do count as income towards that 31K cap. So yes and no.
Thank you. Okay. We did have a question that asked about, if foster youth doesn't have permanent housing, how are they tracked? How are they made aware of these services? I think we sort of covered that in that, if they are a current non-minor dependent, they will be receiving a mailer starting the 2027 tax season. And if they don't have permanent housing and they are a current foster youth, that is like not like they don't have a place to live if they're homeless. Like that's not legal. You do, if you're in foster care, you are required to be provided a place to live. And so that is a bigger issue to figure out and take up with refer that young person back to their attorney and their county social worker to make sure that they get that taken care of right away. And if they're a former foster youth that doesn't have permanent housing, they can use, I mean, we also want to address that, but by the way, for tax filing, they can use a sort of trusted adults, maybe even an agency like, I don't know if Veronica, if you guys allow people to do this, to use your address. Do you do that ever?
We haven't had the necessity. There's usually some supportive individual in the young person's life where they feel comfortable receiving mail, and they go pretty often enough.
Thank you.
But we would, we would in the future if necessary.
Okay, I'm not seeing other chats in the chat or in the questions box, but if I'm missing anything, emails or Veronica that you see, feel free to take it on. And if you see nothing, we can end the webinar.
I'm not sure we answered this one, but
Okay.
because I was looking for the checklist and everything, but the side job and how they prove if they got paid for sitting or for
Yeah,
doing films or
there's a,
something like
there's a couple of ways. So like I mentioned, if they have a Zelle, if someone sent them like an online funds transfer through Cash App or something to pay for the babysitting or for the nails, if it's cash, then you want to let them know they should get a receipt from the person who paid them. We have forms for that. So if for whatever reason someone comes to us, they said they paid me in cash, I don't have any proof of it, we give them this like receipt form for them to go back to the person. Hopefully they're still in contact with them to have them fill it out.
Thank you. I think we covered it all. We're at 11:27. We will say goodbye now, and we really want to thank all of you for attending. We'll be sending the slide deck and the recording to everyone who registered for the webinar later this afternoon. And we hope you all have a good rest of your week, rest of your year. Bye-bye.